Hello, friends. Welcome you to the Smooth MOOC on Universal Design, Accessibility Planning, and Social Inclusion. This MOOC has been created under the Global Center of Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability at the Technical University of Berlin and funded by the German Academic Exchange Services, that is DAAD. This module has been curated under the aegis of Laboratory of Inclusive Design at IIT Roorkee. Friends, to introduce myself, I am Professor Gaurav Raheja, who's a professor in the Department of Architecture and Planning at IIT Roorkee. Welcome you to Module 4, which focuses on universal design from an Indian perspective. As part of this module, we shall focus on reflecting the five principles of Universal Design India, followed by a range of few case studies to understand in detail these five principles, that is equitable, usable, cultural, economic, and aesthetics in light of an Indian perspective. I believe by now we are already positioned in the foundations of universal design as a theory as we move forward to uncover the story of universal design from an Indian lens. Friends, India is part of the Global South engagement as represented in the world for many reasons of its contextual similarities. There are things which, of course, relate also to the global north, but especially on the economic and the socio-cultural dimensions, there are few ranges of, of similarities by virtue of which India finds itself representing a part of the global south itself. To have a little idea, India is not just a boundary of a nation. India is a fairly large pluralistic dimension of human existence with one of the highest numbers of population. So there are many ways in which the term India can be seen. One is through the population demographics, second, through the wide range of cultural coexistence, third, the wide range of geographical, climatic, and topographical ranges that exist within this whole piece of land, and also a civilizational view which comes from its history, traditions, and other complex layers of ethnic origins. Friends, India can also be seen as a majority world by virtue of the fact that 1.4 billion plus people are today part of its growing population. Let's have, to put in perspective, few numbers for a little understanding. As per some datas, I believe there can be differences in the datas from different citations, but predominantly the purpose here is to reflect on some numbers which fairly give us some idea of the challenges that India has. So one of the challenges India has is poverty. As per some data from the World Poverty Clock, it says around roughly 6% or 86.8 million of the population in India are living in poverty. The Census of India 2011 states the population of persons with disabilities as 2.21%, which we have discussed earlier in our modules, stating that it is a high underestimate, and also with the new definition of disabilities, we expect this number to be somewhere around 10 to 15%. Around 41% is the direction in which our elderly population is expected to touch 60 and above by 2031. And if we go further, the diversity of India is expressed in terms of, as I already mentioned, in climate, regional affiliations, religious beliefs and faiths, urban and rural mix, and various cultural aspects. The urban and rural divide in India, or coexistence in another way of seeing, can be reflected from the map presented on your screen. You can also see the red dots reflect the larger dots as cities with a million plus population, whereas the yellow dense dots reflect a range between a hamlet or a small village to a saffron colored very large village. If you see in this form of diversity how the population of this large land of a subcontinent is spread around, we would find some very high densities existing in some of Indian cities like Mumbai, like Kolkata, like New Delhi. And as a consequence, we are very concerned about India's future urban development. And here we are trying to see why the universal design principles in India make a very strong case for them getting embedded as part of any understanding or applications in future. We also find the beauty of India lies in the fusion of its modernity along with its traditional beliefs. And this is where you find we are, as part of a cell phone digital engaged generation, we are equally also engaged in the idea of traditions, as here you see from a temple, the elephant coming out. This coexistence has huge implication on the use of products and the built environment by the people of India. Not only this, I would say this is embedded very strongly in the comprehension of a holistic way of life. And therefore, to intervene in these environments requires a very strong social understanding and hence an interdisciplinary way of learning universal design. Look at these traditions reflected in the products from the Barbie, which is in India, with a sari, which is an Indian dress form, versus also the terracotta mug, which is also a material practiced from the Indian vernacular styles with, with the paintings of a traditional motif. Likewise, a modern home with traditional interiors and the spaces reflecting a similar material context as expressed in some of the traditional spaces of India. Reflecting the value of traditions, how a small example of a automobile also has been attired or inaugurated for its beginning through an auspicious temple based ceremony. The reason of reflecting all this is to start understanding the social and the physical nuance of how the environment coexists, because it's the human thinking that brings the societal virtues together as coexistence. Interesting way to also look at is how the traditional coffee, which is served in South India, popularly known as the filter coffee of South India, and the remaining cafeterias of the world are distinctly identified by the containers and the content. How the coffee is served here and how the coffee is made there. Both of them remain coffees, but they too reflect coexistence of tradition and modern evolution. In light of this, let's go back a bit into the history. In 1957, the Prime Minister Nehru had appointed and invited Charles and Ray Eames, the famous designer couple from the United States of America, to study in India and make recommendations about how the poor quality of consumer goods could be addressed through better education. This feature of this report is well known and represented in the India report authored by Charles and Ray Eames, which became the foundation for setting up of the National Institute of Design in India. What was very interesting as part of their study was their focus on one Indian object called lota, which is a utensil of the form as seen in the graphic here. And what Charles and Reims said, in fact, they analyzed it very well, that of all objects we have seen and admired during our visit to India, the lota, that simple vessel of everyday use, stands out as perhaps the greatest and the most beautiful. Was a discovery from a foreign lens of the Indian design. And friends, they discovered around 101 qualities of this design, be it from ergonomics, be it from its acoustics, be it its material properties for health in terms of storing water, and many other dimensions of this design, which continue to inspire us and reflect upon that what from our ancient heritage continues as part of our design thinking is perhaps an inclusive way of looking at some of our design experiences as well. So, going forward from here, the idea comes now is UDIP, Universal Design India Principles. Friends, the story of Universal Design India in brief goes like this, that a group of scholars, designers, including my own self, had formulated these set of Universal Design India principles, which were copyrighted by the National Institute of Design, led under the guidance of Professor Abir Malik. Professor Abir Malik was at that time also at the Jamshedji Tata Chair of the National Institute of Design, and prior to this had been part of the Universal Design Group in the United States of America. So he brought in this idea as a leader to position this question of contextualizing universal design for an Indian landscape. And this inquiry got all of us together and excited that yes, universal design as seen from a global lens, and now there is a need of extending it towards an Indian contextual perspective. Because when we look at India as a large nation with its own set of numbers, demographic challenges, we realize in order to be inclusive, it's important to first contextualize the definition of inclusion here itself. So, UD India principles are standalone universal design ideologies that focus in Indianness and inclusivity as they relate to age, gender, disability, caste, class, religion, poverty, and urban and rural backgrounds. These complexities are a way forward from the universal design theories that we understood from the Ron Mace and Center for Universal Design Idea Center at the United States of America. So UDIP is an idea to contextualize and extend universal design ethos into the Indian landscapes. Looking at this, the five principles that were coined, incidentally, were coined in the Indian language called Hindi. And I would read out the Hindi letters first and then explain them also in English. So it says Saman. The idea of Saman is equity. Sehaj, which means usable, easy to use. Sanskritik, meaning cultural or culturally appropriate. Sasta, meaning economic value being restored or economic in dimension. And Sundar, being aesthetic as a part of its profound understanding of principles. So, when these principles were coined, the idea was to also distinctly identify what each of these principles embed within them as a criteria. So, Saman. What does Saman mean? Saman means the design is fair and non discriminating to the diverse users in India or in Indian context. Friends, irrespective of the intersectionality of the human existence, in India we have always felt that cultural coexistence is a norm. And within that context, the idea of non discrimination and plurality as a coexistence with equitable opportunities is a challenge. And this challenge is addressed by this principle. So, looking at this, it implies to avoid prejudices against people of all ages, gender, disability, sizes, caste, class, and religion. Consider different capacities of users and build, in many ways, many levels of engagement. Provide choices in access and use through flexibility and customization. Allow personalization through inclusion of adjustable and adaptable options. And finally, provide equality in challenge, opportunity, and energy requirement. An example is the metro rail service, which is incidentally growing rapidly across various cities in India. How these metro rail services are providing spaces for all ages, genders, disabilities, and castes reflects in India's growing mass rapid transit system. Considering different capabilities of users, they have provided for various ranges of mobility means, information systems, and also adding to the choices in access through flexibility. Looking at this further, as Delhi Metro Rail Corporation as a glaring example, we would say any metro rail system follows a system from its entry to the exit. Let's have a quick look at how this entire journey from entry to exit incorporates a universal design principle of equitability. So the first example is wayfinding system. At the entrance through multiple rows of station identifier plus the signage system, it gives us the access to where we are. Then the entry moves further through ramped access and by enabling choices to elevators, as we can see through the lifts and through ramps. The horizontal circulation is guided by the tactile guiding surface indicators, which is the TGSIs, which enable for people with visual impairments a kind of simple and intuitive way of stepping out of elevators or moving to the elevators or walking inside the premises of the station. Besides the other forms of horizontal circulation, including the wayfinding on the floor systems. Similarly, other forms of signage with high contrast colors and the various facilities for persons with disabilities kind of highlighted on the walls of the station itself. The vertical circulation reflected through the idea of elevators, which also have integrated various features for persons with disabilities, as you can also see from the highlighted space above the elevator, and on the other side, enabling choice from staircases as well as by escalators. So multimodal means um, of movement in vertical circulation enables a um, case of equitable opportunity. Ticket counters with low height, with regular heights, and embedded with features like speakers at information counters to enhance audibility reflect the integration of equitable opportunities here. In terms of gates to access, which is the AFCs, the automatic fare collection gates, one of them being wider and the other one being the regular space one, reflects an example of how at the same level diverse set of users can access the same metro rail. And similarly, We move into the journey space where the platform level and the metro car level integrate at the same level, and inside this, spaces designated for ladies, spaces designated for people with disabilities, integrating the most advanced system of information of station and the train journey reflects how multiple modes of information technologies design have gone into the making of this metro rail, one of the world class experiences with an Indian sense of traditions as well. And having said this, it also has made several attempts in enhancing this journey towards the exit sides as well, making the first and last mile connectivities to some extent better. For example, this is the overhead bridge which connects it from the New Delhi main rail station to the metro station through an enclosed movement of the skywalk with escalators and lifts. This connects various kinds of multimodal transportation hubs, makes the journey more interesting and the experience more seamless. Moving forward, the principle two is Sahaj, meaning usable. The design is operable by all users in the given Indian context. It reflects upon providing independence, comfort, safety, and support during use. Further, it states facilitate access, operation, and convenience by diverse users. Thirdly, talks about including adaptations for those experiencing difficulty in use, and then providing clarity in use, operation, and maintenance to minimize instruction and avoid confusions to errors. It advocates the idea to adopt simple means to overcome complex operations. Friends, usability is one of the highlights of the universal design in regulating any operations for the performance of a special task or a day to day, everyday living tasks. So, if we look at this, it advances further by saying it must follow cultural norms to address user expectations, offer multi sensory feedbacks to point in the right direction, build in intuitive operations and innate understanding of the problem, allow easy adaptation to facilities used by persons with diverse abilities, and finally, prevent costly mistakes and unintended consequences from misuse. Friends, all these theoretical points actually embed a very strong sense of research and study in order to customize things in India from the usability lens. This does require a mass scale understanding for various ranges of products because cultural acceptance in terms of usability is something where a lot of gaps still remain to be filled in. For example, mobile as a device is universal in its approach. It is easily usable and interpretable by diverse users. I think with the growing Indian population, the way our digital programs of government have advanced and have percolated from the highest levels of literacy to the highest levels of illiteracy reflects the power of design and universality, how it can integrate if it is a good design. Similarly, the power of the technology also reflects examples like development of apps. For example, currency detector apps in mobile phones can be used by people with visual impairments to also read out which currency note are they exchanging with. However, we have also advanced with digital payment systems which are even more safer to engage with doing transactions. The third principle it talks about is cultural appropriateness and Sanskritic. I must admit to say here that these principles had evolved even a year before the eight goals of universal design. So the term cultural represents here the design which must respect the cultural past and the ethos towards the changing present, assisting all users in Indian context. Friends, universal design respects cultures. Universal design is not limited to the idea of disability perspectives of design only. It tries to embed this belief that our cultural ethnic origins must be sensitively responded to in design. If that is done, possibly we would be more sustainable in our approaches to design. So it says maintain social and traditional qualities in design, include Indian idioms to make historic and social connection, present in many languages for inclusive comprehension, and for all castes and society levels. It does expect us to advocate responding to local contexts and conditions, employing appropriate technologies to match user expectations as well. If we believe that we can integrate the idea of cultural embeddedness into design, perhaps our user base would get even widened and possibly happier also. For example, the Indian squat toilets developed with new materials, for example in steel, reflect integration of respecting the cultural value of design while embedding new technologies and new materials for its creation. So maintaining social and traditional qualities in design. An example of the, the South Indian meal called the sadhya, which is laid on the banana leaf, are examples of the cultural historic past that we have and continue to value them in the contemporary times as well. This is a contextual response of design for all castes and society levels. Likewise, another meal. So, food has been one of a very important and a possessive idea of reflection of culture. And if we see how the food is served at various levels, it starts reflecting the regional and the cultural associations. And these local contexts are very important when we design or create environments for humans. To the extent the development of technologies like Alexa, which we are already considering as a great example of design or universal design with inclusive features, has added features of languages now, wherein if you translate it into Hindi, it can still perform certain functions for us. So, taking a voice command in diverse languages opens these new technological designs towards the cultural appropriateness as an expansion. Likewise, moving forward, taking an example of Jaipur City Palace in Rajasthan state of India. There's a famous Indian palace in the city of Rajasthan, and also some part of it is reflected as a museum. Accessible features through retrofitted ramps to access the galleries and exhibits are examples of how attempts to retrofit by design for making access to cultural past is being seen in these cases. The tactile reproduction of a miniature style painting reflects how certain examples of visual designs are being communicated through a sensory field of a tactile sense. All these are efforts wherein design has been responded through stone, through other materials, by engaging an all inclusive sensory approach into the design process. The fourth principle that it talks, and I believe is a very, very important principle, something which the American or the Western principles of universal design does not directly highlight upon. And that principle is called the principle of economic dimension. In Hindi, it's called sasta. If I were to say it in further extended language, I would say we have to understand the A, B, and the C. The A is the affordance or affordability, the B is the budgets that we have at national levels or for any project, and C is the cost. Together reflecting the economic value of any proposition. Many a times, since we have a large population also suffering from the context of poverty, many designs do not become accessible, or many spaces or many systems do not become inclusive by virtue of an economic challenge of deprivation. It's very crucial for any design to be done in India to address this idea of economic value as a proposition. It respects affordability and cost considerations for diverse users in Indian context. To be truly inclusive in an Indian context, I think the economic value has to be preserved. How do we look at that? Ensuring affordance, durability, and maintainability, using local materials for energy savings and cost effectiveness, focusing on low unit cost through wide distribution, and adopting modular approaches to offer choice in features and price range. Friends, these challenges create a new dimension for our innovative world to look into, and I believe each of these principles therefore opens a door for in depth research on various design aspects that we need to still work upon to make environments inclusive in an Indian way. So, for example, the Jaipur foot, which is a prosthetic fitment to the lower limbs, is an example of how, at low costs, this was achieved without compromising the quality and transforming the lives of almost 2 million plus beneficiaries. It remains one of the world's largest organization for the people with disabilities, which provides assistance including artificial limbs, calipers, and other aids and appliances totally free of charge. So far, it has produced several limbs, tricycle wheelchairs, hearing aids, got done surgeries on various people, calipers with walking sticks through an ever expansive zone of influence across India. Such such outcomes are not possible through uh, a very short-sighted perspective, but require a long-term scalable idea. And therefore, we believe if we confine or if we evolve with universal design as an understanding, it can fetch us a very 360-degree approach towards a total understanding of expanding the outreach of many of these environmental innovations or assistive devices or prosthetics to a large scale understanding of the problem. The other example which I'm going to bring here to you is from the eminent Padma Shri architect Laurie Baker from Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. Laurie Baker was a patron for the idea of economic inclusion. He used to say that my feeling as an architect is that you're not, after all, trying to put up a monument which will be remembered as a Laurie Baker building, but a Mohan Singh's house where he can live happily with his family. Mohan Singh reflects the idea of a common man, of a common labor who would be involved in the construction activity. Laurie Baker, well known across the world for his masterpieces in architecture reflecting low cost architecture, economic value of architecture, and climatically sustainable architecture, perhaps is the need of the hour when India is searching for new innovative answers in the building industry and creation of environments as well. His principles, his appreciation of local materials reflects in many ways certain dimensions of inclusivity. Some of the examples you see here is the RCC filler slab, which becomes an example of affordable and climate responsive construction, which can protect millions of us through a very low cost response from the climatic adversities. These are some examples of rat trap bond, which can save a lot of consumption of bricks by 18%, consumption of cement by 24%, and as compared to the conventional English bond construction, and also is lighter in weight. And such built forms and such forms of creative expression are also better performing in terms of uh, climate resilience as well. Maximizing the site potential. How do you do site development so that there is no undue wastage of construction resources? And respecting the site topography is nothing short of saying respecting the environment. And these principles, I believe, were also loaded in our traditional belief systems. However, with advancements and with pressures of population and time, we are sometimes oscillating between an emergent solution and a long term sustainable response. To answer to these dimensions, Laurie Baker's responses continue to inspire as affordance, responsive construction, and respecting the local cultures as these examples. These are from the Center for Development Studies at Trivandrum. The outer half brick thick wall shading the inner wall, creating these kind of uh, patterns reflects how the air movement was well integrated into these designs, and it was well responding to the humid climate of Kerala's estate. The courtyard with climate responsiveness, with daylight filtering into these spaces, people-centric architecture with children integrating into these sand spaces, allowing a certain degree of freedom and respecting the context of user. And it also tries to say that such designs, even if they were meant for low cost construction, they are no less beautiful. Sometimes this notion that making things by reducing the cost, we are going to compromise in the beauty. I think Laurie Baker stands as a very clear example of how he achieved the idea of beauty and aesthetics amidst the challenges of cost while respecting the local culture of the place. I think these examples, therefore, need to be seen in a very, very inclusive manner and continue to take pathways for future directions by seeking inspiration from them. This is the famous Indian coffee house in Trivandrum, and we'll find these spaces are built in with the in situ furniture, which is precast and made on site with jalis and a ramped access to the entire building. Finally, we come to the fifth and the last principle of universal design India theory, and that is Sundar. It basically means aesthetics. The design must employ aesthetics to promote social integration among users in Indian context. Friends, beauty is not just about the external appearances. Beauty is an idea of cultural embeddedness, of the values of the past, and how those values also respect the relationship between the whole ecosystem of the society. Aesthetic represents the social identity of who we are. So aesthetic is not just the idea of a superficial existence in beauty, but it's trying to say that every design in the environment must employ aesthetic to enhance the universal appeal and its use. It must allow personalizing aesthetics through flexibility, adaptability, and modularity of color, form, texture, and interaction. The principle of aesthetics says you must employ appearance to inform use and safety by maintaining the right color combinations, by maintaining the right contrast, and by designing it well. We can also bridge wide range of meaning and comprehension gaps. Friends, India as a large subcontinent has been very sensitive to various forms of cultural associations reflected in their deep, ingrained aesthetic logic. It's important to uncover that by studying it, especially under the influence of today's globalized world, the digitized economy, and the artificial intelligence driven world. The India of the future needs to understand and multiply these understandings through these interlinkages, but this requires some degree of effort to study it while we create new directions for its future of inclusivity. A very interesting example are the traditional forms of dresses in India, especially for the women, the saris, and for men, it's the dhoti and the lungi, which is actually on one size, which can be worn between a mother or share between a mother and a daughter and a father and a son, reflects how within that same simple design the intricacies of aesthetics can come in the form of the color association, in the form of change of materials from cotton to silk, and reflects the flexibility, adaptability, modularity of color, form, texture, and interactions across various cultural forms. Having said this, we have a long way to traverse and rediscover the aesthetics of our past in the embodiments of the modern language of the future. Friends, so I believe by now you have some idea about what universal design India principles mean and what are the various cases through which you can reflect upon them. As an independent exercise or inquiry, I would suggest you to think about other examples around you in your own homes or in the environments where you work and ask these questions to yourself. Is this product equitable? Is this space usable? Is this environment cultural? Are we investing into an economic value of design? And is my overall experience aesthetically a pleasant experience? Once we continue to raise these kind of inquiries, they will self guide us into also achieving them. Today, when the world is talking a lot about sustainable development goals, it's important to see Universal Design India principles as a torchbearer and lighthouse which have a overlapping interests with the SDGs and can guide very powerfully the idea of inclusion through all these goals while being environmentally sensitive and culturally responsive. So, friends, with this, we are coming to the end of the module 4, and we shall take you into module 5, which is going to focus on creating inclusive mobility through healthy streets. With that, I thank you for a very patient listening and look forward to seeing you in the later modules. Till then, bye bye and take care.